this is a guy who didn't think supplements worked. And then when you started seeing in lab tests, thousands of people with autoimmune diseases reverse their autoimmune disease. This is working, and I can see it in lab tests, and I gotta keep doing this.
And so really, I would urge people to remember that anything that you put on your skin is really food. It's a supplement. It's a supplemental ingredient that you are adding to make some desired change, just like any supplement that you put into your mouth.
The body is not a static machine. It's a biology, it's analog, and it adapts. If you're consuming food that has a limited availability of certain nutrients, it changes itself to increase absorption of that nutrient.
Welcome to episode 1 of Supplements Revealed. I'm Dr. Patrick Gentempo, and I've spent most of my career in the health and wellness field, and I've always been fascinated by the topic of supplements. Being someone who has studied this quite a bit and has worked with patients in these realms, even I am still sometimes confused by all the information that's out there. A lot of it is rhetoric, a lot of it is scientifically based, and everything in between. So at Revealed Films, we felt it was important to bring to life a docu-series that can examine this subject like it's never been examined before. You are in for a real treat. I know, based on my experience through this journey, that this information not only can upgrade your life, but in many cases can be life-saving. There is no one expert in the world that can tell you everything you need to know about supplements, which is why we are bringing you dozens of them. We want you to understand where the pitfalls are, what things there are to avoid, what risks and dangers actually exist in the world of supplementation. And on the flip side, we want you to know what hope and possibilities exist in these realms. So sit tight. You are about to get the opportunity to get a front row seat to the best and most contemporary information that exists in the world of supplementation. Welcome to Supplements Revealed. One of the most impressive people that I spoke to through this entire journey was Dr. Stephen Gundry. He has an extraordinarily impressive resume. He was a heart surgeon. As a matter of fact, he and his partners still hold the record, even though he hasn't practiced in many years, for the most amount of infant heart transplants. So you can imagine a level of training, credentials, etc., that a man like this has to be able to do that kind of work. But after observing patients get better through supplementation, he felt there was something here that he needed to go explore, and now he's really committed his entire life and the rest of his career to this. He has some amazing, innovative, and very unique perspectives on supplementation. I can't tell you how excited I am to bring this to you. The wisdom you're going to get from this interview can change your life. So tune in and enjoy my interview with Dr. Stephen Gundry. Dr. Gundry, thanks so much for being with us.
Thanks for having me.
So for the people who aren't familiar with your work, tell us a little bit about your history and how you got here.
Well, I'm a world-famous heart surgeon, former chairman and professor of cardiothoracic surgery at Loma Linda University, actually one of the blue zones, the only blue zone in the United States. Mm-hmm. And about 20 years ago, my life was changed when I met a gentleman who I call Big Ed in all my books. And Big Ed had inoperable coronary artery disease. That means all his blood vessels were clogged up. You couldn't put stents in them. You couldn't do bypasses. And Big Ed had gone around the country, like many people, looking for someone to take him on. And he'd spent about 6 months going to centers, and everybody turned him down. And he came to me and after about 6 months, and I looked at his angiogram and I agreed with everybody else that he was inoperable. And he said, well, let me tell you, in the last 6 months, I've gone on a diet and I've lost 45 pounds. And I went to a health food store and I bought a bunch of supplements. He literally had a big shopping bag. And he says, maybe I did something in here. Now, this was a big man when I met him, 265. That's Big Ed. And I said, well, good for you for losing weight, but it's not going to do anything in your heart. And I know what you did with all those supplements. You made expensive urine. You wasted your money. And I firmly believe that. And he said, well, come on. I've come all the way from Miami, Florida to, Loma Linda. Why don't we get a new angiogram? I said, okay. So we get another angiogram. And in 6 months' time, this guy has cleaned out 50% of the blockages in his heart. Gone. I've got the 2 angiograms to look at. And I go, this is impossible. You couldn't have done this. So I started asking him about his diet. And lucky for me, I, at Yale University as an undergraduate, got to design my own major. And my major was human evolutionary biology. And I had a thesis that you could take a great ape, manipulate its food supply, manipulate its environment, and prove you derive it a human being. Mm-hmm. And I actually defended my thesis and got an honors and gave it to my parents. And went off, became a famous heart surgeon. As Ed's telling this story, I go, son of a gun, that's my thesis. And I was a big fat guy at that time. I was 70 pounds overweight, running 30 miles a week, going to the gym 1 hour every day, eating what I thought was an incredibly healthy diet. And high blood pressure, high cholesterol, migraine headaches, arthritis so bad I had to wear braces on my knees to run. And so, long story short, I put myself on this program, and I lost 50 pounds my first year and 20 pounds subsequently. And I started looking at Big Ed supplements, and I'm very famous for protecting the heart during heart surgery and heart transplants. And I had this combination of ingredients that I'd put down the veins and arteries of the heart to protect it. And as I started looking through Big Ed supplements, I realized that several of the things that he was taking, I was putting intravenously into these hearts. And it never occurred to me to swallow the dumb things. Mm-hmm. So that got me very interested in supplements. And long story short, after about a year of doing this at Loma Linda, I realized that I should teach people how to avoid me and not operate on them in the first place. So I resigned my position, and for the last almost 20 years now, I have a practice in Palm Springs and in Santa Barbara where every 3 months we ask people to make some changes in the food, go to Amazon, go to Costco, go to Trader Joe's and buy some supplements, and every 3 months, let's take some blood out of you, a lot, and see what's happened. And so I've written 4 best-selling books on New York Times bestsellers on that. The most famous one is The Plant Paradox. The current one is The Longevity Paradox, How to Die Young at a Ripe Old Age. And so that's what I do. Thanks to Big Ed.
I want to especially talk about your new book, but before we do, I want people to understand this shift that you made. You were a world-renowned heart surgeon, and with all the benefits that came with that, and then you decide to take up this anthem. This was a fairly profound shift, and I'm sure it had to affect your personal life. Talk about what it was like to make this shift.
Well, I looked in the mirror one Friday morning and I said, I'm making a mistake here. Rather than operate on people and then teach them how to eat to avoid me, I need to teach them how to eat, and they'll probably avoid me. And Upton Sinclair had a very famous quote, the famous muckraker of the early 20th century. He said, it's difficult to get a man to understand something if his salary depends on him not understanding it. Mm-hmm. And so you take a heart surgeon whose salary depends on people not taking care of themselves and then teaching people how to take care of themselves, that's really dumb. And you don't make a whole lot of money teaching people how to eat. And we actually went through all of our savings and actually rented houses for a while because couldn't even get any credit. But my attorney kept saying, you're doing the right thing. And sometimes when you do the right thing, it'll come out. And sure enough, after about 17 years of doing this, finally people started listening and started selling books. And now I have my own supplement line, Gundry MD. And so, but it was a lot of chopping wood and carrying water, as Buddha would say.
I want to highlight that and put an exclamation point on what you're about to share. This did not come without a price.
But when you saw something, and then when you started seeing in lab tests and in how people, felt, or throwing away their diabetic medications, or throwing away their high blood pressure medications, or stopping a planned hip or a knee replacement because they actually regrew cartilage, and seeing thousands of people with autoimmune diseases reverse their autoimmune disease, which something that they were told was impossible. So that's why you just every day you saw something go, geez, this is working, and I can see it in lab tests, and I can hear it in people's stories. I got to keep doing this.
I'm really curious about what supplements you include in your protocols, and this was really stepping out on the ledge from expensive urine.
Yeah, the first supplement I get everyone on, I am shocked with how low most people's vitamin D levels are. About 80% of Southern Californians have a low vitamin D. And I personally think that most people ought to run a vitamin D level of 80 to 100, maybe 120 nanograms per milliliter. I run mine personally greater than 120, and I have for the last 13 years, just to prove I'm not dead. And so far, so good. I personally have never seen vitamin D toxicity in my practice. And I've had some people that we've measured. Actually, it's changed my life about vitamin D years ago. I saw an older couple, late 70s, who we routinely draw vitamin D levels. And in those days, we actually had, even if it was above 120, we would actually have a number. And both of them were about 270 and I'm looking at them across the table. And first of all, going through my mind is, well, why aren't you dead? Number one. And some forms of vitamin D toxicity can present with numbness in fingers and toes. And I'm going, any numbness in your fingers? No, why? And I said, well, you must take a lot of vitamin D. They said, oh yeah, it's an anti-aging drug. And I'm going, anti-aging drug? What are you talking about? And so that actually started me looking at the literature in vitamin D and reading all of Dr. Hollick's work from Boston University, who really is the father of vitamin D research. And he's only seen one example of vitamin D toxicity in his life. And that was a physician who, by mistake, because of a compounding pharmacy era, was taking 1 million international units a day for 6 months. And that's a lot. Every patient with autoimmune disease, and about 70% of my practice now is autoimmune disease, a heart surgeon. That's another story. But they all have very low vitamin D levels. The University of California, San Diego has shown that almost all people with cancer have a very low vitamin D level. And that vitamin D is very suppressive of cancer growth. And it also is essential, actually, to make stem cells that repopulate the lining of our gut grow and divide. And without vitamin D, they just kind of sit there and don't move. So if you have a leaky gut, and I think actually 100% of people I see with a disease at its origin is a leaky gut. And if you'd asked me that 15 years ago, I would have laughed you out of the room. So vitamin D, I think, is very essential. University of California, San Diego says the average American should take 9,600 international units a day, which most people's eyebrows go. I say at the bare minimum, take 5,000. If I have somebody with autoimmune disease, I start them on 10,000. Some of my autoimmune disease patients, early on, I have them on 40, 45,000 international units a day to get their levels up, and then we can back off. But I'm a person who looks at blood work every 3 months, so I can see when we might be overshooting. But as long as calcium levels are fine, we're okay. When I'm using very high dose vitamin D, I like to add vitamin K2. I like a mixture of MK4 and MK7. You don't really need much, maybe 100 micrograms of each. If you want more, it's fine. But I like that buffer when I'm using high dose vitamin D. The second thing I think everybody has to have is some form of long-chain omega-3s in their diet, particularly DHA. In my new book, The Longevity Paradox, there's very good data that in humans, people who have the highest omega-3 index, which basically looks at how much long-chain omega-3s that you have in your blood for the 2 months prior to the test, people who had the highest omega-3 index have the biggest brains and the biggest areas of memory, the hippocampus. People who have the lowest levels of omega-3 index have the most shrunken brains and the smallest areas of memory. So when Mom used to say fish is brain food, she knew what she was talking about. Our brain is about 60% fat, and half of the fat in our brain is DHA. And even in kids, we know that mothers who supplement with DHA during pregnancy have actually smarter kids, and kids who are supplemented with DHA as children actually perform much better in school. So it's DHA is brain food. So that's essential. The other thing I think is probably essential for most people. About 50% of people carry one or more mutations of the MTHFR mutation. For people to remember it, I call it the mother effer gene, because if you say it out loud, we'll bleep you from network television. And this gene, we don't make the proper form of methyl B12 and methylfolate because of these enzyme deficiencies. And I think most people really should be taking a methyl B12, and they should get a sublingual form, because quite a number of people, surprisingly, lack what's called intrinsic factor that allows you to properly absorb B12 from your intestines, and putting it sublingual bypasses that circuit. And then methylfolate is a capsule, it's cheap, and it's absorbed without worrying about intrinsic factors. So I think for most people, those are really the big things I start people out. Then we are, in my opinion, very, very deficient in polyphenols. Those are plant compounds that myself and numerous other researchers have shown actually improve the flexibility of blood vessels. I've published results with people taking, for instance, grapeseed extract, French maritime tree bark, resveratrol, and shown that when they take these compounds, their blood vessels dilate effectively. When they don't take these compounds, their blood vessels are actually very stiff. And there's a saying in longevity that we are only as young as our blood vessels are flexible. I've also published data that these compounds make the inside wall of our blood vessels, for lack of a better word, slippery, makes them resistant to oxidation and attack by cholesterol. And we can show that when we remove these compounds, that in fact they become sticky again. And when we reintroduce them, they become slippery again. So here's a guy who thought that, supplements made expensive urine. And I can actually measure, either in blood tests or physiologic tests, the effect of taking some rather simple supplements. In fact, I've actually gotten pretty good at looking at somebody's blood work and say, did you stop, X, or did you change brands? And they go, oh yeah, we ran out 3 weeks ago, and I forgot, or yeah, there was a sale, and so I tried that. And so we these lab results are chronologic order, and you can go, well, look, here you were on this, and here's this number, and here you are now, and they'll look and say, you knew that. And I say, yeah, and it's not expensive urine.
So you bring up an interesting point about the lack of effectiveness, because someone might be in Walmart and say, oh, look, how does one separate the good from the bad?
So, I mean, there are good products that you can find. For instance, just throw out names, Costco and Trader Joe's and even Walmart. But it's a lot of it is buyer beware. I'll give you a great example of fish oil or long chain omega-3s. And there's algae-based fish oil, which is excellent. Many companies, serving size is one thing that everybody should look at, particularly when you're ordering on Amazon. They'll tell you that, the dose is 1,000 milligrams, and you didn't look on the back, and to get that 1,000 milligrams, you had to take 2, and they're only taking 1. Mm-hmm. And so, for example, I'll have somebody that I want on 1,000 milligrams of something, and I expect to see a result on a blood test, and it's not there. And the first thing I'll say is, you're not taking this product. Oh yeah, I'm taking it every day. I said, no, you're not. And they said, oh yeah. And I said, well, how many are you taking? Because I know the product. And they said, well, 1. And I said, well, no, didn't you read the back? What do you mean? I said, well, serving size is 2 to get the dose. Oh, is it said on the front, 1,000 milligrams? I said, yeah, it said on the front 1,000 milligrams, but they, tricked you. And many, many times people, for instance, there's some supplements that they should be taking 4 or 5 capsules to get the dose we want, and they're only taking 1. So buyer beware. Look at the back, look at serving size. And then, for instance, when you're looking at DHA, look at serving size and then go down to the bottom, and you should see EPA and DHA when you're buying omega-3s. Mm-hmm. And I think personally that most people should have 1,000 milligrams of DHA per day. And why do I think that? Because after looking at thousands of patients and looking at their omega-3 index, 1,000 milligrams of DHA per day will get us there in 95% of people. And yet, when you buy a fish oil, you look at, 1,400 milligrams of omega-3s on the front. And then you go to the back and you may not even see the word DHA. Or if you go to the back and DHA, serving size is 2 and DHA is 500 milligrams. So you'd have to take 4 of these to get actually what I want in you. And they go, 4? But the package said, 1. So when buying supplements, it really is buyer beware. You have to understand there is a lot of trickery in supplements, and you got to know, the right amounts.
You mentioned having your own supplement line. Are there some, in order to have them, you had to create them?
Yes. Interesting story. Because of my fame, a lot of supplement companies through the years asked me to put my name on a line of their supplements. And despite the fact that I wasn't making any money, I resisted that because I knew exactly, from all my research on patients, what would work, what the dose was, what I would want. So I always refused them. And so a few years ago, a young man by the name of Craig Clemens came up after hearing me lecture, and he said, gosh, have you ever thought about making a line of supplements? And I said, oh, geez, don't get me started. And my wife was with me, and she said, oh, geez, not another one. And I said, yes, but, people want me to put my name on supplements, but, I know what should go in them, and I want to control that. And he goes, well, we could do that. And I go, what? And so my wife said, well, how are you going to sell them? And he said, well, we do 45-minute infomercials on the internet. And my wife goes, right, who's going to watch a 45-minute infomercial on the internet? And Craig said, well, you actually might be surprised. And of course, now we've had, over 30 million views of Gundry MD and me talking for 45 minutes on the internet. And so now, we're, as far as I know, we're the only supplement company where every one of my products I've designed which ingredients are going to go in there, the proper ratio of those ingredients based on my clinical practice of asking people, to go get 20 of these things from Amazon or whatever, and I'm not going to sell them to you because I'm a researcher and I didn't want to be involved in a profit margin to make people take supplements. I wanted to see what happens when they took the dumb things. And I think that's actually one of the reasons I have, why I sell supplements is because I can control them and I made them based on what I saw in actual people. I think there's some very interesting areas of things we should be investigating. Number one, the compounds in mushrooms, which are called polyamines, are very longevity promoting. They're actually fascinating. So we've recently launched a liquid mushroom product called M Vitality that you can even mix in coffees. So mushrooms, in my research on longevity, in fact, there's a recent paper out of Singapore looking at humans, and humans who eat 2 cups of mushrooms per week, and that's not much, cooked or raw, have about a 90% reduction in Alzheimer's compared to people who don't eat 2 cups of mushrooms. So, if we had a drug that was 90% effective against Alzheimer's, how much would you pay for that drug? And all you got to do is, buy a carton of, criminy mushrooms in the grocery store and either slice them on your salads or cook them or buy a supplement of mushrooms. And mushrooms are fascinating. So that's one really new addition. The other addition is there's more and more evidence that certain bacteria in our gut promote longevity and promote protection of our gut wall. And one of them has got a hilarious name, Akkermansia muciniphila. Say that 3 times. And this bug loves a type of fermented green tea, which is called pu'er tea. And you can get it. People have to make sure it's organic because most of it comes from China and a lot of it's contaminated with arsenic and heavy metals. So people, again, have to be aware. But this particular tea fosters the growth of Akkermansia muciniphila. So I drink actually about 3 to 4 cups of that tea every day, and I have for years. And that's available. You can go wherever supplements are sold or tea is sold and find this. So those are a couple of new exciting steps in longevity.
That's great. I love it when you say this is what I'm doing. That's the final test because it's good for the physician and the patient.
Well, it's funny. In this book, the people have asked me for years and years and years, what supplements do you take? And I've always, said, no, I'm not going to tell you because you'll really think I'm a nutcase. But I actually list all the supplements that I take every day, and it is rather hilarious. I take actually about 120 pills, capsules, tablets in the morning and about 80 at night. And again, this is a guy who didn't think supplements worked. Now, why do I do that? Well, the reason I do that is if you look at hunter-gatherers, even modern hunter-gatherers, they consume on average about 250 different plant species on a rotating basis throughout the year. And all of these plants are growing in 6 feet of loam soil. They're the ultimate of biodynamic and organic. And all the animals that they're eating were also consuming these plants. So you're getting this incredible combination of polyphenols, flavonoids, anthocyanins, constantly in varying amounts throughout the day. And even if we ate an organic diet, even if we visited our farmer's market, the average American maybe at best gets 20 different plants in their diet on a routine basis. And unfortunately, most of our animals, have been fed corn and soybeans and grains and aren't eating grass and acorns and bugs. So if you really think that the best diet, the farmer's market diet, is going to duplicate what our ancestors had 100,000 years ago, I've got oceanfront property in Palm Springs to sell you. And I don't think it can be done. Now, we have a saying in our office that 150 is the new 100. And I firmly believe that. So we'll find out when I'm 150 if all this worked. But in the meantime, I'm investing in what I know, what I've learned from my patients, and they've taught me a great deal, that I want to try to duplicate what we used to be exposed to. And this is the field of epigenetics. Our genes have very little to do with our fate. In fact, in the book, we point out a huge article in Nature last year showed that humans' fate is only determined about 6% by our genes. 94% of our fate is determined by what we eat and the microbiome within us. And that's actually very liberating, because a lot of us say, oh my gosh, mom died of cancer, dad had heart disease, and he had diabetes, and so that's my family history, and that's what I'm going to get. It's absolutely not true. We are in control of our fate, and we're in control of our fate through our mouth.
That's really inspiring. It's also inspiring hearing that you still let your patients teach you.
Oh yeah, the dedication to the plant paradox was to my patients, because really everything in this area of my life that I've learned came from my patients either asking me a question that I didn't know, and I said, I'll find out, or asking me about a supplement, and I go, I know nothing about that, and I'll tell you what, I'm going to try it on myself first, and I'm going to look at my blood work, and I'll get back to you. And so, looking at their blood work every 3 months when we ask them to do things, taught me, everything that I write about in my books. So I'm so grateful to my patients.
Well, I'm really grateful to have you here, and I can't thank you enough.
Well, thanks for having me. Good to be here.
Pretty impressive stuff, wouldn't you say? What a champion he is for supplementation and natural approaches towards gaining health and well-being. I am really glad there's people like that in the world of supplementation and natural health, and I am also very excited that we got to share this with you. So thank you very much for tuning in.